The episode begins 6 months after Mark killed Angstorm and began his training with Cecil Stedman, the director of the Global Defense Agency. As his training progresses, Donald, Cecil's android assistant, reports that Mark has made significant progress in his speed, strength, and agility. While Mark lifts heavier weights than ever before, Cecil claims he might still not be ready to go up against Anissa, a formidable Viltrumite warrior, which is why they need to continue training him. Just then, Rex Splode walks into the facility and asks Cecil to upgrade his prosthetic arm, which has been giving him some trouble. As he and Mark joke back and forth about his arm, Donald reports that someone is trying to steal the Declaration of Independence from the National Archives. When Cecil tells Mark to go after the thieves, Rex insists on accompanying him. Once he is given the green light, both of the young superheroes head to the National Archives, where they notice two brothers rushing out of the building holding the Declaration of Independence. However, the thieves are no match for their strength, and Rex quickly knocks down one of them, while Mark tries to stop the other one without using his powers. All of a sudden, Multipole appears in front of Rex and begins beating him up for getting his sister, Duplicate, killed. Although Rex tries to tell him that he had nothing to do with his sister's death and that the Lizard League killed her, Paul refuses to believe him. He continues beating Rex up as Mark makes his way through his clones, ripping them apart one by one to get to his friend. Elsewhere, Immortal tells Duplicate to get dressed, claiming that it is time for them to go. Back at the National Archives, Mark reaches Multipole and is about to kill him as well when Immortal and Duplicate appear in front of them. While Duplicate tries to stop Mark from killing her brother, the two thieves take this as their chance to escape with the Declaration of Independence. Mark knocks Multipole out, claiming that he is going to prison for wreaking havoc. Sometime later, Mark returns home to find April, his brother, Oliver's special child caretaker, and asks her about the importance of the Declaration of Independence. Instead of giving him an answer, she tells him to ask his brother. Once she leaves, Mark's mother reminds him that Oliver looks up to him and that they should spend more time together. As his mother had suggested, Mark goes out to play catch with Oliver. When Oliver asks him if he can accompany him and Rex on their missions, Mark assures him that he can join their team once he gets his powers. To his surprise, Oliver jumps high up in the air and begins floating. Mark realizes that, unlike him, Oliver's powers have arrived much earlier than expected. At the GDA headquarters, Duplicate comes out of hiding, revealing to her friends that she is alive and only went into hiding for a while. She then shows them that she and Immortal have gotten engaged. While everyone celebrates their engagement, Black Samson brings a healed Ray out to meet Rex. Meanwhile, inside the control room, Donald tells Cecil that there have been a series of unexplained geological events throughout the United States, also revealing that Oliver has managed to access his powers. At Mark's house, his mother expresses her concerns about Oliver being too young to control his powers, but Mark assures her that he made Oliver promise not to use them. Later that night, he goes out with his friends Rick and William, where he ends up confessing that the other Eve who had confessed her feelings told him to either love Eve or let her go. William tells him not to tell Eve about the other her and encourages him to ask her out since he likes her. The next morning, Mark makes his way to Eve's house to ask her out. At the same time, Cecil arrives at his house to meet with his mother to try and convince her to let Oliver train with them. Meanwhile, Doc Seismic secretly works on creating earthquakes all over the country. As Donald struggles to reach all of the superheroes, he realizes that they have all been abducted. Mark confronts Eve and asks her out, but when she agrees, he accidentally ends up mentioning the other Eve in front of her. Offended, Eve asks him if he only asked her out because he feels sorry for her. Before he can respond, Mark receives a call from Cecil telling him that he and Eve are the only superheroes left, forcing him to leave his conversation with Eve in the middle. During this, Oliver, who had overheard Cecil's conversation with Mark, tries to sneak out of his room to rescue the superheroes. However, he does not get far before he is caught by his mother. Since he apologizes for trying to sneak out, his mother promises to ask Mark to train him. In the meantime, Mark and Eve enter the underworld where Doc Seismic has begun wreaking havoc. With all of the superheroes trapped inside spider webs, he summons large creatures to kill them. Mark and Eve arrive just in time to save their friends. Despite their combined effort, they struggle to battle against Doc Seismic. Left with no choice, Cecil deploys Darkwing and Reaniman to help them. By the time they arrive, Mark and Eve had also been knocked down and were trapped inside a web. The Reaniman warriors break the superheroes out of webs. With renewed vigor, the superheroes begin taking down Doc Seismic's creatures. Watching his plan fail, Doc Seismic tries to kill all of them, but Darkwing takes him to the Shadowverse and brings him out unconscious. When Mark sees who has been sent to rescue them, he angrily claims that he will not work with Darkwing and Reaniman. He then rushes past the superheroes and arrives at the Pentagon, where he confronts Cecil and asks him why he is working with Darkwing and Sinclair. Cecil informs him that they have gone through intensive psychological restructuring and are only trying to help repay their debt. Cecil then leaves the room and heads to a white room, with Mark following after him. When Mark asks him why they are in the White Room again, Cecil claims that it is for his protection, just as several Reaniman soldiers surround him. Cecil reminisces about his past, recalling how one mission led him to a store where an anonymous tip had informed them about a possible chemical weapon. When a young Cecil scours the store, he calls back to Control, telling them that the tip is a bust. However, as soon as he says this, he notices a strange green light emitting from a container. At this point, he realizes that he is looking at the chemical weapon, but before he can call for backup, Knucklebuster appears behind him and attacks. Cecil tries his best to fight her, but she manages to steal his gun and unarm him. He warns her that backup is on its way, but she laughs it off, claiming that no one is coming to help him. Despite being unarmed, Cecil manages to knock her out. He then rushes towards the chemical weapon and tries to defuse it. Once again, he is attacked by Force Fist, who knocks him back. Just then, they hear sirens in the distance, and Cecil reveals that he had used code words to call for backup. Knowing that they are running out of time, Knucklebuster and Force Fist activate the weapon, releasing a gas that burns their skins off. With the last remaining strength, Cecil quickly shuts the doors to contain the gas, and, in the process, gets his skin burned off as well. By the time help arrives, Cecil is nothing more than flesh and bones. Months later, Cecil, who had undergone a procedure for artificial skin grafting, and his boss, Radcliffe, make their way to the safe room, away from the Komodo dragon. While on their way to the safe room, they come across the Komodo dragon, who is about to attack them when he is stopped by none other than Knucklebuster and Force Fist. Shocked to see two criminals out and about, he asks Radcliffe why they are not in prison. Radcliffe reveals that he has reformed the two of them since their skills were too good to waste. Cecil refuses to sit by and watch two criminals suddenly become superheroes, which is why he pulls out his gun and kills both Knucklebuster and Force Fist. As a result, he ends up going to prison, where, to everyone's surprise, he reforms the criminals. One day, Radcliffe visits him at the prison and informs him that he has been handpicked to serve as the director of the GDA. Although Cecil refuses to take over, Radcliffe tells him that he was sent to prison to reform, just like Knucklebuster and Force Fist. In the present time, a confused Mark asks Cecil what he is doing and that he does not pose a threat to him. However, Cecil insists that he is threatening him, and he needs protection. Mark then claims that he does not want to work with criminals who have killed people before. When he notices that Cecil is not acknowledging him, Mark angrily kills one of the Reaniman soldiers before tearing through all of them. Left with no choice, Cecil decides to pull out a trigger and activate it, causing Mark to get unbearable headaches, rendering him useless. He reveals that he planted a device in his head that will prevent him from flying or attacking anyone. Feeling betrayed, Mark bursts out of the room and flies out, but Cecil hits the trigger again, and he crashes into the ground. At that moment, Cecil arrives at the headquarters as well and tells the other Guardians to stay out of it. He presses the trigger again, and as Mark begins screaming, his friends begin to worry about him and tell Cecil to stop. Despite this, Cecil refuses to stop as Mark continues to scream. Not being able to stand watching his friend in pain, Rex decides to attack just as Cecil orders more reanimin soldiers to surround Mark. Once Rex attacks, the rest of the Guardians jump into action as well and begin taking down the reanimin soldiers. While fighting, Rex notices the trigger switch in Cecil's hand and blows it up. To his surprise, this triggers the dead man's switch, and Mark continues to wither in agony. Eventually, Cecil decides to deactivate all the reanimin soldiers and the device implanted in Mark's head. Angry, Mark tears through the reanimin soldiers and corners Cecil, warning him to stay away from him and his family. Later that night, when Mark returns home, he tells his mother about Cecil's betrayal. She angrily tells her sons that they are cutting ties with him. Oliver, who was listening to the whole ordeal, offers to help Mark take Cecil down. But both Mark and his mother remind him that he is far too young to go out fighting crime. On the other end, the remaining Guardians begin arguing among themselves as some justify Cecil's decisions while others defend Mark. Not being able to tolerate the Guardians calling Mark rash, Rex decides to leave the GDA. Immortal and Duplicate decide to stay back while others join Rex. Once the remaining Guardians are done cleaning up their headquarters, Cecil tells them that they can begin recruiting new members. Before he leaves, he makes Darkwing a Guardian. As Cecil heads back into the control room, Donald confronts him and asks him if making a murderer a Guardian is a good decision. However, Cecil insists that people make mistakes and are capable of change. Recalling his first day as the new director of GDA, where he was shunned by everyone who only knew him as a murderer until he proved them otherwise. This episode begins with two brothers with superpowers using their powers to rob a bank until they realize the horror they have caused due to their actions. Motivated to change their life, the brothers end up getting a job at a restaurant, and everything seems to be going well for them until their cost of living increases, and they are let go from all of their jobs. When they are evicted from their apartment, they are left with no choice but to rob the bank again. However, this time, there are superheroes to stop men like them. Now working alone, Mark hears about a bank robbery in progress where the two brothers are involved. He rushes to the scene to capture them. While fighting, he gets caught by one of the brothers. But before he can fight his way out, Oliver shows up and manages to free him. Mark quickly takes the two brothers down and angrily drags Oliver home. Although he reprimands his brother, he tells his mother that they cannot prevent Oliver from using his powers for long. Meanwhile, Rex and the rest of the Guardians find a new building to call their home. When Eve joins them, she reveals that she is going to be moving back with her parents to try and fix their relationship. At the same time, at Machine Head Empire's headquarters, Mr. Liu tells Titan that he needs to free Multipol from prison, since he is the Order's best assassin. When Titan refuses to help him, Mr. Liu reminds him that since he took over Machine Head, he has to fulfill his obligations to the Order. Although Titan tells him that Multipol got himself into trouble and can deal with it on his own, his assistant tells him that they cannot afford to disobey the Order, or they will replace him with another one of their own. Knowing that they don't have much of a choice, Titan agrees to help break Multipol out of prison. Not far from them, Mark teaches Oliver how to fly as the two of them make their way to meet Art, who has designed new costumes for them. Just as Art gives Mark his new blue suit, they hear about an attack in Peyton Penitentiary where superpowered individuals are involved. After promising not to interrupt his fight, Oliver accompanies Mark to the prison where they notice Kursk and Furnace wreaking havoc. Mark quickly goes to handle them, but Oliver interrupts their fight and almost gets himself killed in the process. Unaware of their whereabouts, their mother goes out on a date with her colleague, Paul. During their date, she reveals Mark and Oliver's identities to him. When her sons get home that night and find that she has revealed their identities, she and Mark end up getting into an argument. Later, when Eve stops by, Mark expresses how upset he is with his mother and confesses that he has been having a hard time playing several roles at the same time. Unbeknownst to them, a camera floating nearby watches every move he makes. At a nuclear missile silo that the Lizard League previously attacked, the Mauler twins break into the facility and try to steal a nuke when the Guardians who are still working under Cecil arrive to stop them. However, they are no match for the twins, who manage to defeat their entire team quickly. Mark, who had seen the news, rushes to help the Guardians. While he fights with the twins, Oliver flies to the silo to help Mark. As the twins fight the two brothers, they decide to launch the nuke. While Mark flies towards the nuke to stop it, Oliver takes up the twins. Just when Mark destroys the nuke in the sky, Oliver rips the twins apart, leaving everyone shocked. As soon as Mark comes back and notices Cecil talking to his brother, he takes Oliver far away and tries to help him understand why killing people is wrong. However, Oliver shares the same sentiments as their father and does not understand why killing the bad guys is a bad thing. Back home, Eve tries to assure Mark that Oliver is only a young kid who still has no control over his powers, claiming that with time, he will learn to be better at controlling himself. Once she leaves, Mark and his mother confront Oliver to help him understand that all lives matter. Just as the family shares a hug, Mark notices the camera watching him and quickly flies out to grab it when suddenly it explodes, leaving Mark with more questions than ever before. The episode begins with Rex-Splode accompanying Shrinking Ray to buy groceries for the team now that they have gone rogue. Rex tries to convince her to skip cooking and use Robot's credit card, but she insists when they suddenly hear an explosion outside with a villain rampaging in the city. Left with no choice, Rex and Ray go outside to deal with the situation. Back at the hideout, Mark brings back a drone he catches spying outside his house. The others worry that someone knows about his identity and his address. Still, Mark claims that they also learned about his family. Robot informs Mark that the drone is too damaged to determine who built it or who was controlling it. He claims that the design is from Earth and quite sophisticated. Rudy adds that whoever made it has significant resources, which Mark suspects must be Cecil's work. Mark later breaks into the Pentagon, but quickly gets overwhelmed by sentry bots and restrained. Cecil and Donald appear before him and ask why he has attacked the Pentagon. Mark confronts him for spying on them, but Cecil denies it, claiming that if they did, they wouldn't know about it. Realizing he is late for his date with Eve, Mark leaves but declares it's not over. Mark hurries to meet with Eve, but a glowing portal opens beside them when they are about to kiss. Dropkick and Fightmaster emerge from the portal, the same duo who previously stole the Declaration of Independence. When Mark claims they should be in prison, the brothers explain they had a reason to steal the Declaration and that lives are at stake. They then enlist Mark's help to overthrow their king, claiming them to be from the future. Eve argues that they could have just teleported to an earlier time, but they explain that they only have enough juice to make this one last trip. When Mark refuses, they push him toward the portal and bring him into the future. Mark furiously demands they return him, but the brothers convince him to listen to their request. In exchange for his help, they'll return the Declaration of Independence they stole. Seeing the future in ruins, Fightmaster explains that this is the aftermath of centuries of war. Centuries ago, the planet was on the brink of a collapse until one man was made ruler of Earth. He ruled well for a time until something changed, and he slowly went mad. It began with new laws, mandatory work camps, and prisons for dissenters. Things suddenly escalated with senseless wars, mass production of his royal guards, and entire nations punished and forced to survive without power or technology. When he tried to wipe out 10 cities for resisting, the rebellion was formed and stood up against him. They wanted to stop him, but he was too powerful for them. The brothers even went to make a time machine to retrieve the ink from the Declaration of Independence. rumored it could be made into a poison to kill him, but it still didn't work. When they saw Invincible, they believed that he could be the one to save them. Given their description, Mark suspects it's a Viltrumite, but the brothers are unfamiliar with them. When wondering what they do next, they create a commotion that lures the royal guards to their location. Mark quickly obliterated them. The brothers explain that they planned on getting caught, believing it to be the fastest way to see the king. When a guard scans Mark, they quickly recognize him as Invincible and state that they've been waiting for him. When the brothers were taken elsewhere to be executed, Mark wanted to save them, but they urged him to stop the king instead. Mark carries on with the mission and meets the king, who quickly recognizes him as the Immortal. Immortal is relieved to see him, but when Mark confronts him about hurting people, he claims he left him with no choice. He argues that it was the only way to bring him back. Immortal explains that he's not a Viltrumite and shouldn't have left him in charge to rule the planet. Mark wonders if his problem is because of Kate, but Immortal doesn't remember her claiming to have had hundreds of wives and outlived everyone he ever loved. He demands he pay what he is owed and asks Mark to give him a swift death. When Mark refuses, he claims that he left him in that position and blames him for his mistake that led to countless deaths. Still refusing to kill him, Immortal forces Mark's hand by pulling him into a fight. When that wasn't enough, he even tried to kill the brothers who walked into the room. Left with no choice, Mark decapitates him, pulling his head from his body with superhuman strength. With the king dead, the authority returns to the people, saving the world. The brothers try to comfort him, but Mark still blames himself for what happened. The brothers return him to the past, where Eve awaits. Wanting a change of scenery, Mark and Eve take their date to a new location, but not before they return the Declaration of Independence, which the brothers promised in exchange for his help. After flying worldwide and enjoying the different views, Mark confesses his love to Eve, to which she responds. Meanwhile, light years away, Alan the alien sits in a Viltrumite prison cell. Before his incarceration, Alan fought with Anissa, a ruthless Viltrumite. Instead of defeating her, he lets himself be captured to find Nolan Grayson, aka Omni-Man, and Mark's father. He later saw him still alive, awaiting execution, which would happen after he had fully healed as per the Viltrumite tradition. Using his implanted communication device, Alan told Nolan he enlisted Mark's help in the war between the Coalition of Planets and the Viltrum Empire. He begs Nolan to join their cause but refuses, claiming that his execution is justified for his betrayal of Earth and Viltrum. Alan refuses to give up, but Nolan's answer won't change. When he thought there was no hope, Nolan suddenly had the desire to see his wife. When his captors try to execute him, Alan breaks out of his restraints and destroys the enemy's devices, to which they return him to his cell. Nolan suggests he escape and is worried things will worsen once the Viltrumite executioners arrive. Alan continues to convince him, but Nolan claims that his punishment is befitting of someone who disgraced his kind, betrayed his family, and abandoned his sons. Nolan recovers from his injuries and is escorted to his execution, where two Viltrumites await him. Alan breaks free from his cell, risking everything to save a former enemy. Nolan is then chained to the ground as two Viltrumites beat him to death while reading him his many crimes against the Empire. Fleeing from a hail of bullets, Alan breaks out the other prisoners, hoping they'll create the distraction he needs to save Nolan. They tried to fight back against their oppressors, but when it wasn't enough, Alan broke free the most dangerous inmate, Battle Beast. Battle Beast wonders if there are worthy opponents to fight, and Alan promises him the Viltrumites, torturing Nolan. The executioners wonder what could have caused Nolan to stray from his mission, having heard of his great exploits in the war. While Nolan gets a thrashing from the executioners, Alan and Battle Beast force their way through fighting their captors even if they're outnumbered. After clearing a path, Alan was surprised to find an empty room. Battle Beast is furious for deceiving him after being promised a fight with Viltrumites. Instead, he turns his attention to him, claiming him to be the only worthy opponent there. Still, Alan notices the ground shaking from the executioners beating up a defenseless Nolan. Just when the executioners are about to finish him off, Alan and Battle Beast fall to where the execution is being held. Battle Beast is thrilled to finally find the chance to test his strength and battle against Viltrumites. When Alan is about to free Nolan, the other executioner attacks him and beats him down, clearly outmatched against a Viltrumite. Seeing him beat down Alan, Nolan stands up and breaks free of his restraints with sheer strength. Too injured to win a fight alone, Nolan works with Alan to beat down the executioner while Battle Beast keeps the other one busy. Just when they thought they had time to catch their breath, their captors caught up to them and started shooting. Cornered by the enemy, Alan suggests flying outside to escape, which sucks the enemy into outer space, frozen to death. The battle continues in outer space, where Nolan and Alan fight one of the executioners while Battle Beast tenaciously stands his own against a Viltrumite. Nolan tries to hold him in place while Alan delivers blows at the executioner. The executioner breaks free and charges at them. Still, Alan and Nolan deliver the finishing blow that shattered his skull with their punch. At the same time, Battle Beast continues his brawl with the other executioner deep in outer space. Nolan asks him why he had to go through all that length to save him, even risk his life. Alan explains that he considers him a friend, and although he fails to convince him to join them, he refuses to see him die. Worried that more Viltrumites might come, Alan suggests they swiftly escape, but Nolan reassures him that no one is coming. Alan looks confused, to which Nolan reveals that there are fewer than 50 pure-blooded Viltrumites left in the universe, and would not risk losing more by capturing fugitives. He claims this is the Empire's most closely guarded secret, and why he believes they can beat them. The episode opens up with Titan taking his daughter Fiona to school. As soon as he drops her off, he notices one of his men waiting for him nearby. When Titan reminds him that he is not to be disturbed during family time, the man claims that they have a problem. Meanwhile, Multipol, who is still locked up, forms an escape plan. He begins by creating several clones of himself. He then climbs to the ceiling, where he grabs onto the wall just as his clones multiply. As the clones begin to fill the small cell, they manage to crack the door open with the pressure. The clones start to crush each other until the cell is filled with blood that flows out of the door. Multipol then kicks the cracked door open and rushes out. When security guards enter the courtyard, they try to stop him, but he is much faster than them. Paul creates more clones that take the guards on while he makes his way towards the exit. However, to his surprise, the door opens before he can reach for it, and another guard steps in. He puts a collar around his neck that prevents him from using his powers. Once again, he finds himself in an interrogation room. When his sister, Duplicate, comes to visit him, she asks him why he would try something so stupid. She reveals that she had almost managed to convince Cecil to let him be a part of a team as payback for all of his crimes. Instead, Multipol only responds by saying that people like them are not meant to serve sentences. Kate tells him that the Order does not care for him, which is why he is in prison, and they are not. Angry, Multipol claims that Cecil and the GDA are not any different. Not wanting to argue with her brother, she reminds him that their father's birthday is coming up. In a flashback scene, a young Kate and Paul, who had managed to duplicate themselves, were forced to watch as their delirious father, who was unable to take care of them, was escorted to a mental institute. As the flashback fades, Paul claims that he blames their father for letting the two of them be taken away. From a young age, they were forced to train all day long. One night, after a particularly bad day where Paul was forced to hit Kate, he pretends to go to bed. When someone comes in to check in on them, he hides his real body while his clone sleeps soundly in his bed. Once the man left, Paul sneaked out and joined the Order, who began using him as a weapon. Kate tells him that he should not have left that night since he has now become a murderer. This does not sit well with Paul, and he reminds his sister that she too is being used by the GDA and has murdered for them as well. Tired of trying to reason with him, Kate gets up and leaves. On the other hand, Mark and Eve, who had spent the night together in his room, are startled awake by his mother calling him down for breakfast. Eve jumps out of his window and comes in through the front door, pretending like she was in the area and only came to say hello. However, their secret is exposed by Mark's younger brother, Oliver, who claims that the two of them had a sleepover. Embarrassed, Eve tries to change the topic by talking about pancakes. Mark soon comes to her rescue. He asks his mother how much renting an apartment costs. When she asks him why he is interested in getting an apartment, he tells her that he and Eve want to be together after the incident with Angstorm, claiming that since she is now dating again as well, he would like to give them some time alone. His mother confesses that she likes having them around, but agrees to support him since he is now an adult. Sometime later, he and Eve begin planning their new life together. As they try to figure out how they will afford their apartment, Eve comes up with an idea. She heads to the prison where she talks to the warden about the problems occurring at the prison. She suggests that they should hire a superhero on retainer, claiming that she belongs to a security firm called INVINCIBLE Incorporated that offers some of the best superheroes around. Meanwhile, Mr. Liu meets with Titan again, who tells him that the mission went sideways and they were not able to free Paul. Angry, Mr. Liu asks him to try again, but Titan informs him that they have too much heat on them and cannot make a move without problems, since the prison has now hired a superhero to make sure that the prisoners remain locked up. Mr. Liu threatens him to break Paul out, or he might harm Fiona. Scared, Titan rushes back home only to find that his daughter is safe. But when she tells him that a strange man had bought all of the cookies she was selling, he tells her that she will be staying home until it is safe for her to go out again. That night, Eve creates the website for their little business, while Mark watches her. Once again, his mother interrupts them by telling them that Oliver is missing. Both Eve and Mark fly over the city searching for Oliver until they see him riding his skateboard with his newfound friends. Pleased to see his brother making friends, Mark hides in a tree and watches him playing. Soon he notices 3 teenage boys confronting Oliver and his friends, telling them to leave. However, Oliver is not one to back down, and he challenges the boys. Before things can escalate, Oliver uses his super speed to go around them and takes their pants off. He successfully manages to scare the boys away. On the other hand, Ray is about to fall asleep when she hears a knock on her door. When she checks, she finds a note with a picture of her and Rex sitting around a table, sharing a meal. As she heads down into the kitchen, she finds Rex cooking. She asks him what he is doing, and he confesses that he is making a meal for them since she had told him that she wanted to have a normal dinner. The two of them share a nice meal together, even though it is far from normal. That night, Titan goes to meet Machine Head and asks him for his help in dealing with the order. Machine Head starts laughing and refuses to help him. He claims that he needs to do everything the order tells him, or Mr. Liu, who can turn into a dragon, will put an end to him and his rule. The next morning, Mark tells his mother about Oliver's friends. Despite finding it odd, she agrees to not say anything to Oliver. Mark assures her that they need to let Oliver be normal and that she can call him or Eve for help at any time. Just then, his phone starts ringing and he realizes that he has officially received his first task for Invincible Inc. When he reaches the prison, he finds Titan wreaking havoc in the parking lot. He manages to stop him, but is surprised when Titan tells him that they need to talk. Mark hesitates at first, since he had been betrayed by him not too long ago. However, when Titan reveals that he had arrived at the prison in hopes that they would meet, Mark agrees to talk to him. Titan takes him to his neighborhood that he has been working hard to restore after the wreck Machine Head had left it in. He claims that Mr. Liu has asked him to break Multi-Paul out of prison. If not, both the safety of his family and the neighborhood are at risk. Mark refuses to break Paul out, claiming that he is a murderer. Then he turns to Titan and tells him that he is under arrest. All of a sudden, Titan jumps into an open sewer underground and runs through the tunnel. Mark follows after him and tells him that he should give up since he can fly. But he soon finds that he is wrong because when he gets to the end of the sewer, he finds that Titan is missing. To make matters worse, when he gets out of the sewer, he discovers that everyone around him is dressed in the same clothes. Back home, Mark begins to question if he made the right choice, but Eve assures him that even though Titan is not as bad as Machine Head and the Order, he is still evil and that he made the right call. At the same time, Mr. Liu arrives with his bodyguard and tells Titan that his time is up. Instead of backing down, Titan challenges him and tells his assistant, Isotope, to escort Mr. Liu and his bodyguard out of the building. To his surprise, Isotope teleports and appears behind Mr. Liu, claiming that he has changed sides since he wants to live. At that moment, Mr. Liu turns into a dragon and attacks Titan. Although he tries to put up a good fight, Titan is no match for the large dragon. When the dragon catches him in its mouth, it manages to break part of his shell before throwing him out of the window. Isotope watches as Titan plummets to the ground. He announces that there is no way that he could have survived the fall. Mr. Liu tells his bodyguard to look after his human body while he heads to the prison. Sometime later, the warden at the penitentiary notices the dragon heading towards them and immediately calls Mark for help. When Mark receives the message, he tells Eve that he might have made a mistake. Instead of making him feel bad about it, she quickly changes into her costume and tells him that they will tackle all of their problems together. Not long after that, the two of them arrive at the prison where Mr. Liu has already begun wreaking havoc. While Eve heads inside the prison to trap all of the escaped convicts, Mark tackles the dragon. However, it is much faster and stronger than he had anticipated. Inside, Eve traps Multipol inside a makeshift cell and heads out to help Mark. She notices that he has been stabbed multiple times and is bleeding. Just then, the dragon prepares to attack him again, unaware that his human body is in danger. Machine Head arrives at the headquarters with Isotope and manages to get rid of Mr. Liu's bodyguard. He then shoots Mr. Liu's body, causing the dragon to disappear. Later that day, Mark wonders if he did a good job, but Eve assures him that he did not have much of a choice. But Mark continues to feel like he has been used and has helped kill Titan's biggest rival, which is why he and Eve decide to slow down and hold off on renting an apartment. He tells her that he does not feel right leaving his mother to look after Oliver on her own. When he tells his mother about it, she is happy to hear that she will have him around for longer. She confesses that he was right about letting him be a child and make friends. Meanwhile, Machine Head becomes the new head of the Order and makes a deal with Titan where he lets him keep the city. However, he threatens to kill his family if he betrays him again. The episode begins with Scott Duvall's perspective on the destruction of Chicago when Invincible fought Omni-Man. After losing his sister and niece, Duvall seeks out justice by approaching District Attorney Barnett and presenting the petition he and his wife did, requesting an investigation into the incident. Barnett explains that Invincible was merely defending the planet from an alien threat who happens to be his father. Duvall questions his intentions and asks to let a jury decide if he claims to be innocent. Barnett brushes him off, but not before claiming their laws don't apply to similar situations. He later secures a job at the Global Defense Agency as one of their researchers, still upset over the Invincible incident. Later, Duvall takes matters into his own hands and confronts Invincible as Powerplex. His wife, Becky, supports his decision and hooks up a disc that lets him store enough power to hurt and even kill Invincible. Although these discs will help him get his revenge, they are irreversible, and he claims that they've tried everything else, and nothing works. After attaching all the discs, Becky starts hammering at him until he has enough energy stored in them that he fires off electricity with his hands. You'd think he'd be happy with successfully weaponizing his powers. Still, he breaks down in tears, realizing there's no turning back. Meanwhile, Elephant goes on a rampage at a burger shop, furious at the people eating meat. Oliver sneaks up and punches him against a car. Invincible reminds Oliver to be wary of his surroundings and ensure that civilians are not caught in their fighting. Eve tells Oliver not to destroy the store, or they won't have any burgers after the battle. Later, Oliver asks Mark if the people would ever forgive their father, but Mark claims that despite the lives he saved, it doesn't cancel out all the ones that he killed. Mark explains that Nolan was two different people. One was the dad they knew when they were kids, but the other was a Viltrumite with a mission to do, even if it meant hurting many people. At dinner, Oliver was gloating about how Mark showed him the basics of fighting when he learned them early. Debbie compliments Eve for doing well with her studies now that Mark has dropped off from school. Paul, dating Debbie and a family friend, asks Mark about the business they started. Mark explains that he and Eve have become retainers at Peyton Penitentiary to handle any breakouts or incoming attacks at the facility. He claims their last job there must have convinced others to avoid it. Paul claims that the same remains true in real estate, where he had to convince everyone in the neighborhood to only sell them to him, proving that reputation is essential. Later, Paul worries he doesn't fit in their lives and cannot relate with her superhero kids, but Debbie reassures him that he just needs to be there for them. Later, Mark and Eve go bowling with William and Rick for William's birthday. When William is kicking their butt in bowling, Amber and his boyfriend Kyle join them. When they thought it'd be awkward, Mark and Kyle bond over a shared interest in Seance Dog. Suddenly, they see the news about Powerplex on a rampage downtown, demanding to confront Invincible. Mark turns off the TV, claiming that he can have a night off and that other heroes are around to handle it. Shapesmith arrives on the scene, but Powerplex insists on dealing with Invincible alone. Shapesmith recklessly charges and keeps punching him, forcing Powerplex to defend himself. Little did he know that his punches only charged the discs he had on him. When he has enough energy stored, Powerplex then sends him flying with a powerful electrical wave. Worried about what he has done, Powerplex returns home after severely injuring Shapesmith. When Duvall thinks it was all for nothing, Becky claims he will have to attack the memorial tomorrow, where Invincible will indeed show up. His heightened emotions caused power to surge in the house, which scared off his son, Jack. Meanwhile, Rudy works on a belt that helps with Amanda's curse, which causes her to de-age every time she transforms. He explains that it's an advanced genomic engine miniaturized, hardened, and built around a fusion battery core. After successfully stopping her de-aging, Amanda embraces Rudy, grateful to him for helping her with her curse. Seeing Rudy and Amanda embrace each other, Ray goes to see love interest Rex. Rex was surprised to see her and wondered if she, too, felt the same feelings he had when they had dinner the other night. Ray confirms she did, but informs him that she is quitting the team, which shocked him. When Rex makes a big deal about it, she claims that he has always joked about quitting and buying a farm or getting a job somewhere where people aren't trying to kill him every day. Rex argues that he was joking, but Ray insists that their work always takes them into situations where they constantly risk their lives for others. Rex got shot in the head, and Ray almost got eaten by a giant lizard that tried to attack her. Rex reveals that his last name used to be Sloan, but was changed by the government when they bought him from his parents and turned him into what he is now. He explains that Rexplode is not some secret identity, but the only one he has. He worries that giving it up would leave him with nothing left. Despite their differences, Ray claims that she's still leaving the team, which Rex understands, and the two kiss on the roof. At the memorial, while the families of victims mourn their losses, Powerplex hijacks the event, demanding a confrontation with Invincible. When Mark asks the others to escape, Eve claims she'll handle the situation. Debbie agrees with her, arguing that the assailant is disturbed and that showing up will only worsen the situation. Although Powerplex continues to destroy the barrier she forms, Eve claims that she already realized hitting him would only make him stronger. Powerplex tries to force his way in with power, but Eve skillfully restrains both hands long enough for the other heroes to arrive. Immortal, Darkwing, and Shapesmith arrive to assist and apprehend Powerplex. Powerplex accidentally charged his disc while transporting it when they hit a bump on the road. He then starts banging his back against the wall, but when the guards try to stop him, they are too late. He has charged up enough energy, which he uses to send the van to skid and crash. Powerplex then breaks free from his restraints and escapes. He returns home to his wife and child and worries that GDA will soon come to capture him, having realized who he is. Becky refuses to leave him and claims that there must be another way. Back at the memorial, reality sinks in when Mark sees all the victims' names on the epitaph. He explains that he had never really thought of the victims, but now that he has had the chance to see it all in person, he feels guilty about the people who got caught in their fight. He claims that Cecil has sheltered him from all of these, which Eve states must be one of the advantages of working for the GDA. Mark realizes that they need to see these things and understand the consequences of what they do. That night, Mark asks Donald for information on Powerplex, who, until a few hours ago, was a researcher at one of their labs. Donald explains it was how Duval got his hands on an experimental storage technology that he used to enhance his low-level energy absorption superpower. He states that Duval has been tracking him for months, which Mark suspects must be who sent those orbs at him. But Donald claims those aren't his. Donald explains that Cecil was telling the truth when he said that those weren't GDA technology. When Mark wanted to see Duval, Donald explained that he had escaped when they had transported him to Peyton Penitentiary. Donald reassures him that they will soon get him into custody when they suddenly receive a ransom video calling Invincible out and turning his wife and son into hostages. Invincible goes out to meet Powerplex, where he supposedly has hostages. He explains how he knows about his identity and how his sister and niece died in the exact location where they are now. He sincerely apologizes for his loss, but Powerplex rejects his apology and attacks Invincible. Invincible claims he knows how his powers work and refuses to fight him. Worried for the hostages, Invincible kicks Powerplex away and tries to free them, but Becky spits on him in disgust. With Invincible confused, Powerplex sneaks up from behind and sends a powerful jolt to attack his head. Little did he notice that he was discharging so much electricity that his wife and son got burnt to a crisp. In a fit of rage, Powerplex channels his anger at Invincible, who slowly advances and embraces him until he burns up all that energy instead of fighting back. Mark takes Powerplex back to GDA to be treated, but Donald explains that they are unable to remove the discs without killing him. Donald reassures him that something like this will never happen again. Mark asks for some time with Duval and explains how he feels sorry for what happened to his family. He claims he remembers them now and will work on making right with them. But Duval rejects his apology and vows to one day escape from that place and find him to finish it once and for all. That night, Mark sits on the roof, speechless, when Eve shows up to comfort him. She just sat beside him, and they embraced, while a mysterious surveillance orb watched them from afar. The episode begins with a bloodied Invincible after beating up Angstrom until his entire head busted wide open. Angstrom clung to life and used his powers to open a portal to the Technicians, a trio of super advanced physicians from an alternate dimension. They did a fantastic job patching and fixing him, given the poor condition in which he came in. Months later, Angstrom gathered like-minded Invincibles from alternate dimensions and used his powers to lead an attack on Earth. They quickly take out high-value targets all over the world. Meanwhile, Mark still feels guilty over what happened to Powerplex. But Eve claims he can finally get the help he needs in prison. When he didn't seem relieved, Eve canceled their dinner with her parents, worried he'd be too distracted to meet them. Mark noticed that Eve didn't want Mark to meet her parents, but she argued that it was not him. It was just that her parents were as problematic as she described them. Mark claims that despite how terrible they can be, they are still her parents. This coming from a man whose father tried to enslave the planet for the Empire. Suddenly, they receive a call of attacks across the world. Elsewhere, Rex helps Ray move to her new apartment. Ray notices Rex's smile and wonders if he is too happy to get rid of her. He argues that for the first time in his miserable life, he is genuinely happy, especially since their relationship is working well. Ray invites him back to her new bedroom, to which he agrees when they suddenly hear an explosion nearby. Rex changes into his outfit, and Ray does too. He reminds her that she has already quit the team and reassures her he will call if he needs her. Invincible arrives at Peyton Penitentiary and discovers it's in a wreck with people fleeing from the scene. Trying to figure out what happened, he later finds Movinci emerging from the wreckage and realizes he is responsible. Invincible tries to get him to talk, but he struggles to defeat him as he shares the same powers. He briefly incapacitates him when superheroes Bolt and Kid Thor arrive on the scene and mistake him for being one of them. Powerplex escapes prison during the chaos and wants to join them as they gang up on Invincible when he discovers Movinci. He attacks him with his powers, but Movinci sends him flying with a powerful punch. With the help of the others, they defeat Movinci, and Invincible joins Eve to find out what's happening. Even the Global Defense Agency was hit hard by one of the Invincibles. Although they defeated him, they took several Reanimen before finally taking him down. Donald states that at least 18 more of these Invincibles are attacking the rest of the world, but claims that they seem to destroy everything they can with no discernible pattern or plan he could detect. Cecil worries that there's no way for them to predict what they will do next. Donald claims that one good piece of news they have is that these Invincibles don't seem as strong as theirs, and Cecil hopes they might have a chance then. Mark wonders what they should do, and Eve suggests they take them down one by one when they suddenly run into superheroes trying to overwhelm the lone Vale Invincible. Mark and Eve join them, but even together, the other heroes are taken down, unable to keep up with them. Just when they were about to finish him off, another one arrived, Omnivincible. While Mark struggles to handle Vale Invincible alone, Omnivincible chases after Eve. She tries to help, but Omnivincible overpowers her and knocks her to the ground, breaking her leg. When they try to gang up on Mark, who carries an injured Eve in his arms, the GDA's Reaniman jumps on them, to which Cecil asks Mark to bring Eve in to be treated. The Guardians of the Globe hideout was also hit hard by one of the Invincibles, Invincible, who took down most of the Guardians. Immortal tries to keep up with him, but even he stands pale in comparison to Invincible. Darkwing and Duplicate try to help, but they are simply outmatched. Invincible eventually takes out Immortal, decapitating him when Darkwing sneaks up from behind and traps him in the Shadowverse. Meanwhile, Retro Invincible attacks the Teen Team base, knocking out Amanda and injuring Rex. Rudy tries to buy them time with his robots, but Retro Invincible finds Rudy and pulls him out. Bulletproof arrives and pushes Retro Invincible against the wall, but it barely has any effect. Rex stands his ground and launches an attack, asking Bulletproof to escape with the others. Despite his efforts, it was all in vain, and Retro Invincible grabs Rex by the throat. When he is about to finish him off, Rex claims he will take him out with him, using his entire skeleton to create one massive explosion. The second day of the Invincible War ended with casualties from both sides. Angstrom suggests they proceed with the next phase and gather the remaining Invincibles to meet at Mark's home. Now that they have accomplished tarnishing Invincible's reputation, Angstrom claims it is time they are reunited to reveal that he's still alive after their last confrontation. The other Invincibles refuse to follow him, claiming that they helped him as planned and now demand he fulfill his promise to give them more dimensions to conquer. When one of the Invincibles threaten to kill him, another one suggests they just torture him, worried that they'd be stuck in the current dimension if he died. Angstrom already foresaw they'd turn on him, so he opened several portals and pushed them through them with his drones. Mark refuses to leave Eve's side, worried that the Invincibles will attack her to get to him. Cecil states that he needs to go out there, claiming that the world needs him. He even goes on to state that his brother Oliver and mother are out there, but Mark turns him down. Later, Cecil returns, claiming that he has found Angstrom, whom they believe is responsible for the attacks around the world. Mark charges at Angstrom, still in disbelief that he's still alive, claiming to have killed him in their last fight. Angstrom uses his spying drone orbs to attack Mark while trying to push him into one of his portals. Mark struggles to approach Angstrom, who has had thousands of his drones attack him from every direction. Mark makes his stand, and Angstrom sends thousands of drones to push him into the portal behind him. Mark withstands them and slowly approaches Angstrom, taking down the drones gradually. When Angstrom can no longer hold him down, Mark dashes towards and grabs him by the throat. As he is about to finish him off, Oliver arrives and cheers him to finish him once and for all. When Mark hesitates, Angstrom uses that brief hesitation to escape into a portal. Mark tries to pull him out, but ends up cutting his arm instead, and he escapes. Angstrom returns to the technicians and demands they fix his arm so he can bring the Invincibles back and finish what they started, but they refuse. He tries to escape, but the device on his head makes him stop, suggesting that this was a failsafe they built should Angstrom go back on his word. The technicians claim promises were made, and Angstrom doesn't plan on honoring his despite having delivered their part of the deal. The technicians declare that he works for them now. Mark and Oliver fly back to the city and find it in ruins, with most buildings leveled to the ground from all the fighting. Los Angeles, Chicago, and New York were struck hard during these attacks, while Paris, Moscow, London, Tokyo, New Delhi, Seoul, and Sydney have suffered similar damages. The death toll worldwide has climbed to a staggering hundreds of thousands, which others suspect would triple in the coming days or even weeks. The world is in shock, still unable to figure out what happened when several Invincibles attacked them. Mark returns to the GDA to check on Eve, claiming that all that time he spent torturing himself when he thought he killed Angstrom, he should have made sure that he did. Cecil walks in and claims that he can't blame himself for being a good person. Mark worries that Angstrom will return, which Cecil claims is why they need to rebuild, find new talents, and put teams back together to prepare for when he returns. He asked Mark's help in New York to assist with the rescue efforts. When they arrived, Mark wondered how they'd start rebuilding from all that when Powerplex suddenly attacked him the minute he arrived at the scene. Oliver punches him, but Mark tells him not to fight him and to wait it out until he uses up all his energy. As he is being taken away, Powerplex blames Mark for all the destruction, claiming him to be the cause of everything, to which the others start to doubt him. Mark returns to Eve and realizes that Powerplex is correct, and that everything happened because of him. Angstrom did it all to get back at him, but when he was waiting for a sign, parents arrived. The GDA brings Immortal, but before Donald can get a word in, he retires from the Guardians and proposes to duplicate, claiming to want to start a family together. Cecil meets with the remaining heroes and lays out the situation with them. That being said, Cecil wants Mark to lead the Guardians, but refuses, claiming he isn't fit to be one. Mark claims they can call on him to help, but otherwise, he will be helping out with the cleanup. Cecil tells him he can talk to him, but Mark refuses, claiming he is the last one he wants to talk to. Later, Mark faces reality while helping clean up and find bodies under the wreckage. Out of nowhere, Conquest arrives and is displeased that Earth is not ready for the arrival of the Viltrum Empire. He claims that Mark was given time and leeway, but still, he has not carried out his duty. Mark claims this isn't the best time for it and states that right now, he only wants to hit something hard to vent his frustration. The episode picks up from where we left off when the Viltrumite Conquest arrives on Earth to check Mark's progress. Mark isn't in a mood and decides to talk with his fists, to which their fight leaves the city in ruins as innocent bystanders get caught in their battle. Conquest claims that Anissa would have told him by now how the Viltrum Empire would turn this wretched planet into a utopia, but not him. Unlike the others, Conquest prefers Mark to resist as he enjoys fighting. He claims that there's no greater pleasure than feeling the warmth of his fists drenched in blood. When he reaches out to him, Mark catches him off guard and smashes him through several buildings. Conquest emerges from the wreckage unscathed and pulls Mark from under the rubble. He then grabs Mark by the neck to choke him and demands more fighting. Mark breaks free of his hold and kicks him away, which impresses him. Mark keeps it up and connects his attacks to land a decisive blow that sends Conquest into outer space. Instead of worrying, Conquest is thrilled and blows a kiss of his blood at Mark, which he charges at him. He grabs Mark and delivers a decisive blow to his head that sends him crashing through several buildings and into the ground. Debbie sees the news and starts to worry about Mark, who is shown getting beaten by a Viltrumite invader. Oliver runs out, wanting to help Mark. As soon as Oliver leaves the house, Debbie cries. Mark slowly stands back up when he feels the ground shake from the force of Conquest flying straight at him, and the impact alone destroys the city for several miles. Oliver sees Conquest beat Mark into the air and smashes him into the ground. He tried to help Mark, but struggled to keep up with them, moving the battle across the city. When he is forced to his knees, Mark asks him to stop trying to convince him to listen, but Conquest tosses him into the ground, claiming he won't give him the chance to surrender. Conquest refuses to end it, claiming he enjoys it so much. He tries to convince Mark not to give up on the fight, and claims he needs the right motivation. Out of nowhere, Oliver catches up to them and sucker punches Conquest. When he recklessly charges at him, Conquest knocks him down and grabs him by the leg. Suddenly, Mark comes to his rescue and sends Conquest flying with a powerful kick. Mark asks Oliver to leave, but he insists on staying, claiming they can beat an old guy. Conquest rushes at them, but Mark throws Oliver to safety as he is about to get slammed. Mark keeps attacking, but no matter how many punches he dished out, Conquest seems to withstand it all. Meanwhile, Cecil gets furious for being helpless as they watch Conquest beat up Mark. He checks on Sinclair, who is still far from completing his reanimin. Although confident that his reanimin would be a force of nature, he explains that they are still 2 weeks away from a trial run. Elsewhere, Eve finally wakes up from her coma after incurring severe injuries when she learns of Mark fighting against a Viltrumite on the news. Despite her parents' objections, Eve insists on helping Mark no matter what. Cecil tries to explain that this is the strongest Viltrumite they have encountered, which they believe could have even beaten Nolan. He claims she's not ready to return to the field, but she argues that Mark is alone out there and that she might be the only person to help him. Conquest claims he has been playing with him, trying to get to know a new toy. He pulls Mark by the arm and drags him through walls and into the ground. He starts to wonder why he was sent to beat Mark and conquer his planet, claiming it's too easy. Conquest tells Mark how he knew his father when he was younger and described him as having so much potential. He feels terrible that he's been executed just after he left. Suddenly, Oliver jumps in and kicks Conquest away, helping Mark to get back up. Mark insists that he escape worried he might kill him, but Oliver argues that they can take him on calling him to be old. Conquest claims that he might be old but not weak, so he brushes Mark to the sidelines while he deals with Oliver first. He then picks him up and tries to tear him apart, to which Oliver can do nothing but cry and scream in agonizing pain. Mark pushes Conquest away before he can rip Oliver apart with his bare strength. Conquest recovers and turns his attention to Mark, claiming he'd eat his heart. Cecil arrives and escapes with an unconscious Oliver, forcing Mark to see how helpless he is. Conquest uses Mark's body to ram it against innocent bystanders, ripping them apart with the impact alone. When he smashes him to the ground, Mark breaks free of his hold and punches back, when Eve suddenly appears on the battlefield, worried for her safety, much to Mark's horror. When Conquest turns his attention to Eve, Mark tries to keep him away from her, but Conquest breaks his leg, to which he falls to the ground from the excruciating pain. Eve runs to Mark, but Conquest easily breaks the barrier she traps him in. Realizing that she needs to focus on the battle ahead, Eve pulls the shattered pieces of the barrier to form a suit around her body. When Conquest tries to charge at her, he suddenly stops, and Eve explains that she increased the density of the air. She keeps the onslaught, but Conquest breaks the giant spiked hammer she was attacking him with. Although she may be able to stand on equal grounds with him, he notices she is breathing hard in the suit and wonders how long she can keep it up. Despite that, Eve skillfully uses her powers to attack him in every direction. Eventually, Conquest shatters her armor piece by piece until she has nothing left. He then keeps the momentum and delivers a powerful punch that breaks her jaw and stabs her through the stomach, with her insides falling out of her body. Mark recovers just in time to catch Eve as she falls to her death. Mark begs her not to leave him, claiming he couldn't do this without her. Despite his pleas and screams for help, Eve dies in his arms. Conquest criticizes his grief, claiming that such a weakness doesn't exist among Viltrumites. He then thanks him, claiming that it's not often that he gets to cut loose like this. Usually there are so many mission parameters and people who are not to kill. Still, for whatever reason, he was told to conquer Earth by any means necessary. He claims that Mark did something that pissed them off, and for that, he thanked him. Mark responds by declaring that he will kill him no matter how strong or fast he may be. Conquest was impressed that despite everything that happened, Mark still had the nerve to threaten him, so he urged him to bring it on. After gaining momentum, Mark charges at him, and the impact causes Conquest's mechanical arm to break. Mark keeps attacking him, but Conquest grabs and restrains him. Mark doesn't let up and bites a chunk of his shoulder, which forces him to let go of him. He keeps punching him to the ground, but when Mark gets distracted, Conquest grabs him by the neck and turns the table on him. He tells Mark that he's so lonely as the other Viltrumites are scared of him and that no one wants to be his friend. They send him planet to planet, committing atrocities in their name. He claims he is a victim of his own success, to which he doesn't even get a real name, only a purpose. As he tries to bury Mark into the ground, Eve recovers and attacks Conquest with a powerful ray of light, to which even a hardened Viltrumite like Conquest screams in pain as she burns the skin off his body. When they thought it was over, Conquest stood back up, determined to kill Eve once and for all. Mark screams at him not to touch her and punches him in the face, but Conquest breaks his fingers. Mark refuses to give up, claiming that it is not nearly enough to stop him, to which he then starts headbutting him until he splits and breaks his head wide open. Once he was sure Conquest stopped moving, Mark crawled toward Eve, relieved that she was still alive. He then told her he loved him, to which she did too, and they both passed out. Cecil and the others arrive, horrified to discover the remains of a bloody battle. Later, Mark wakes up at the GDA hospital and is treated for his injuries. Eve tells him that he has been asleep for the last 3 days. When wondering how she survived, Eve explains how she was given powers while still in the womb, but they put mental blocks to limit what she could do. But when something traumatic happens, it overrides those blocks, and she can use her power without limits. Almost dying was stressful enough to allow her to rebuild her entire body. Debbie and Paul check on Mark and are relieved to discover he has woken up despite his injuries. She apologizes for everything being her fault, not realizing the life and the kind of responsibility she had given him when he married Nolan. When Cecil walks in, Mark insists on seeing Conquest's body to ensure that he's dead. Once he does, he asks Cecil to burn it. They later hold a funeral for Rex, to which Rudy gives a wonderful eulogy and takes on Rex's name to honor him. Eve couldn't finish what she was saying, still heartbroken from Rex's sudden passing. She claims that although he cheated on her multiple times, she truly did love him. Eve wonders why Mark is smiling, to which he explains that he was truly relieved to find out that she was still alive, and they later share a kiss. Meanwhile, Sequids, a race of world-destroying parasitic aliens, have overrun the sewers, ready to conquer the surface. At the same time, Battle Beast is picked up floating in outer space by an alien convoy. The technicians finally finish fixing Angstrom's arm. Still, when he asks what they wanted in exchange, they claim they wanted a world of their own after their ambitions destroyed theirs. Donald questions Cecil's decision to keep Conquest alive. Cecil claims that they don't have a choice and explains that they placed him in a 400-ton block of tungsten steel alloy 6 miles underground, which would explode if he so much twitches. He plans to extract every piece of information he's got on the Viltrum Empire, including how to stop them. Oliver insists that he can help Mark and the others with the rebuilding. Mark claims that Oliver was right about the Maulers and Angstrom. If anyone else ever puts his family or anyone he loves at risk, he won't hesitate to kill them. In a post-credits scene, Damien Darkblood, who was banished to Hell, uses magic to summon his master. He reports that he has found a way to return his master to his infernal throne by utilizing a surface dweller of great power. He claims that this surface dweller has abilities far exceeding any other to which his blackened heart will soon be bound to his service. Thank you for watching. Check out these other videos and subscribe and tap the bell to be notified about our latest videos. See you next time.